Hey guys, hope you're doing okay. So, hopefully, you're going to give me permission today to chat about time management. Now, this is something that comes up week on week, day on day with not just people I coach, but people I just have conversations with. And I recognize that the culture and the time we live in, we are constantly being pulled in different directions, and we can feel overwhelmed, frustrated, and like shit that we're not showing up and doing the things we know we should be doing, and we're kind of distracted in the things we feel like we've got to do, but maybe don't want to do. So I want to give you some clear principles and guidelines today to think about, and I also want to challenge you with a few thoughts on maybe what you're doing right now and maybe how you could and should change that to improve how you feel day to day. So expect to hear a few uncomfortable statements, and just know that if I say that, it's not to sound like a judgy prick. It's just to kind of, hold a mirror up to you, and to be completely transparent on what I at least perceive is a fundamental kind of flaw in the way we're living, or many of us are living now. Okay. So first of all, what are we going to get into here? So we're going to talk about the myth of time management, and then I'm going to show you a simple kind of four-step system to improve how you organize and structure your time so that you feel better and feel like you're staying on top of things more. Firstly, the myth of time management. So it's a bit of a deception, the title of this. I think it's it's really the first thing you've got to say is time is a finite resource. It's also the most valuable resource we have, right? You can get more money, you sure as shit can't get more time. We're all, we're all ticking down towards a similar demise. None of us know how long that is, and without being doom or gloom, I think we spend time haphazardly without any consideration of how finite it is. A big thing for me is Stoic philosophy, and one of kind of the Stoic tenets is to really be aware and present with how much time you do or don't have on this planet. And there's a few things I'm going to talk about in this presentation, which I just hope are good reminders for you as someone I care about, because you're listening to this. Okay, so we all have massive competing demands on us. It's obvious to say we're living in this extremely stressful time, this massive recession. You look at the last few years, there's been a big shift in society, and I think we're going through actually a big fundamental shift in the world at the moment. And I think being part of that, it means it's quite an uncertain time to be in. So I think just knowing that you aren't alone in this, and that we all have these competing demands, and day to day it's a struggle and a battle to kind of just keep your head above water. Doesn't mean there's things we can't do to actually make ourselves better. No, but I just want you to know that this is an unprecedented time, and so the stress you are and we are facing collectively is firstly like unknown for us, and something that many people are experiencing. Okay, so moving on from that, I think one of the things I've realized over the years is that I'm something of a people pleaser. Maybe you're not. Maybe you are okay with saying no. But what I've realized, especially in the last couple of years, is that I say yes to things that actually do nothing to fulfill me in any part or any aspect or any role of my life. And I think you need to, or I would encourage you to understand that saying no is perfectly okay. We are brought up in a society where we're told that yes is like a positive and no is a negative. No is not a negative if it means that you can show up and do more, be more in the things that you value in life. So, first of all, I want you to say no more, all right? Especially to things which we'll talk about later on in here, things that actually take away from you showing up for the things that are actually a priority for you. And lastly, to say is I think in this world, it's really easy to compare what others do to what you're doing. And from my experience and myself, what I've recognized is that we all have our own tolerance level. We all have our own capacity to work and rest and recover and so on and so forth. So don't, look at these people spouting stuff on Instagram like, oh, you just got to grind, you just got to do it, blah, blah, blah. They may well be able to do that, but I would probably argue that many of them are out of balance, and they're neglecting other things in their lives that are really important, probably connection, love, and friendships and things like that. So don't feel any sense of inadequacy based on what you see out there. You are you, and you need to figure out your own tolerance level in order to thrive and enjoy life and show up in the things that matter to you. Okay, so here we go. Step one, priorities. So the first thing to ask yourself is what are your priorities in life right now? Genuinely, what are your priorities? Not what you think someone else thinks your priorities should be. What is it that matters most for you right now at this point? And the key thing here is to understand that as we go through life, life is like a series of changes and a series of different seasons. I would describe it as. I'd say, I think it's a Chinese thing where it says that every 10 years there's like a just different season in your life. And I think because we are generally quite rigid in our structure, we like to cling to routine and habit and things like that, we really struggle to embrace the fact that as we go through life, our priorities will change. What do I mean by that? Well, for me, fitness is a big one here. Obviously, as a coach who started out doing fitness coaching, still very much part of what I do, is that, fitness for me as a 20-year-old is now very different for fitness for me as a 40-year-old. But I have clung to the idea that the priority for me in fitness should still remain the same. But now it's just not. And I think you need to be okay with that, okay? Another thing to talk about is for those of you who are parents, when you become a parent, there is an incredible shift that happens. And I didn't see it coming. I honestly didn't. I thought, we're just kind of this little person in our life. It's just going to be a little bit inconvenient and everything else will stay as it is. And it's like, no, that just can't be that way when you've got a child. It just doesn't happen. As much as you may want it to, and I resisted it for a while, you've got to appreciate, especially when you become a parent, that things change and you need to kind of reflect how you view your life and day to day to honor those shifting priorities. And lastly, this is the thing, right? I'm into optimizing how you perform, how you feel, how you look, but you've got to start with this base level appreciation that we have a certain amount of energy every day. And once you burn through that, you're done. And the only thing you can do is rest and recover and then go the next day. You can't hack your way out of an unsustainable way of living. So if your priorities are kind of all over the shop at the moment and they're not balanced in such a way that you can show up in everything you need to do, then you're going to burn out. And that's the truth of it, okay? However, saying that, I also think the idea of work-life balance is a myth in the traditional fixed form of it. I think with the working kind of situation for many of us now, you can go through periods of a time where your work maybe is more of a priority and then it should be less of a priority. But if work is always the biggest priority for you, then I think for most people there's going to be a problem there, which we'll talk about next. So step one, understand what your priorities are. Sit down and write those down. What is it that's most important for you in life right now? And be honest with yourself about that. Step two, audit. No one likes to audit. No one likes budgeting. No one likes tracking what they eat. But really, if you don't take ownership of what you are doing right now, how can you ever expect to make change moving forward? And you've got to look at this as an experiment, because clearly if you're watching this, you're probably not happy with things where they are right now. And so if you continue in this state of ignorance, then I need to tell you that nothing will change. Okay. So firstly, track down what you do for a week. Get a notepad and just write down hour to hour what you're doing. Also, honor the screen time report you might get every week from Apple if you get that like I do, and own that, all right? And that is a big indication on the amount of time you're spending in front of the screen. And for you, that might be important for your job like it is for me, but equally, there's a good lesson to be learned from looking at that, okay? So track everything you do over the week and break it down into these 4 buckets, which I'm going to talk about a bit more in a second. So bucket 1 is self. What I would describe this as anything that fulfills you and fills your cup as an individual human. Okay, so for me, it's things like movement, education, self-development, breathing, self-care, things that keep me going as a man, regardless of anything else I've got to do in this world. So for me as well, being someone who's quite introverted, a big part of this is time by myself, time to reflect. And I know this is, you're watching yourself, well, you don't understand my life, and I don't, but I can only tell you the things that I think are important if you want to maintain a a kind of a level of productivity and homeostasis in how you're living and enjoying your life day to day. So bucket one, I'd say, is, track or write down the things that you do for yourself that are for you as a person. Bucket two, which I think is the next most important thing, is connection. So love, which would be anything like, your family, your friends, your partner, your children, your loved ones, the relationships you have with people that make you feel better. Okay? And I'll talk about the relationships that don't make you feel better in a minute. So bucket three, this is the kind of, and I would say these are probably like the levels are the way I categorize them as most to least important. Bucket three is professional, your work. And I think honestly, like I feel like I'm on my soapbox whenever I say this, but really I don't give a fuck now, because I know from having coached so many people over the years that when you put bucket three as bucket one and it becomes priority number one, which we'll talk about in a minute, that's when you burn out. It really is that simple. And don't get me wrong, you may well go through periods of time in your life where work will be your priority and you have to shift those things. But if you completely neglect the other two for a sustained period of time, you're going to burn out and you're going to be bloody miserable. And that's not what I want for anyone who is watching or listening to this, all right? Bucket four is crap that does nothing for you. And this is about the kind of saying no and protecting your time piece, which you talked about earlier. So relationships that give you nothing, all right? And I've had, few relationships with people over the years like this, and you just can't, got to the point now when last few times you meet them, you're listening, like, fuck's sake, what am I doing here? This is literally doing nothing for me, all right? And I think you need to push back against those relationships and be okay with shedding them. Okay, if they do nothing for you, then say no. And that doesn't matter if they're family, it doesn't matter if they're friends, it doesn't matter, right? It's you and protecting your time to show up and do the things that you value in your life, right? Social media, right? I have to be on social media because of what I do, right? It's one of the main ways I get business, but I also am really conscious of how addictive and poisonous this is. So make sure you are protecting and honoring your time on those platforms. I especially think in this day and age, there's a real negative that comes from being on there in terms of like comparison to others, making yourself feel inadequate. And so, if you can use the platform in such a way that it's entertaining and it's fun and it doesn't give you any of those adverse effects, then crack on with it. But be mindful of that. And lastly, on bucket four is habits which do nothing for the other three, right? So drinking, drugs, stuff like that are generally a release from life because the other stuff is out of whack, all right? So I think if we get those other, the other three things in line, those other habits should inherently die off. They certainly did for me anyway. The pyramid is what I've been talking about here, okay? So I think it's really important to talk about, like, this pyramid is just simply the concept of you being the best version of you can in every aspect of your life, and understanding how you need to prioritize your time to show up and be the best, professional, to be the best parent, to be the best partner, to be the best friend, to be the best you. The base of that pyramid has always got to be you, all right? And again, I know, you're going to say, oh, I'm a parent, like, I do this job, whatever. Like, it's not that I don't care, I do care, and that's why I'm telling you this, all right? But sometimes caring comes across as being a bit dickish, so I apologize for that. But if you are not taking care of you, who the fuck else do you expect to take care of you? No one else is going to, right? You need to take care of you, right? And you need to put yourself first, because if you don't, you can't show up in any other part of your life and be that best version of you. If you're burnt out, tired, grumpy, fatigued, no one's going to thank you for that, all right? So you need to push back against that and making sure you're taking time for you. Secondly, we have one run at this, all right? I'm not going to get into the kind of whole religion, spiritual thing, but, let's just assume we have one run at this, right? And the thing that I think you're going to look back on over your life, and you're going to value the most, are the things that are creating connection and meaningful contact with other humans. That's what we're designed to be, right? So that's where the next priority of your time should be in your life. Lastly, professional. Like I'm lucky enough to love what I do, but I know many people don't, and I think it's more common than not that people, kind of don't enjoy their work. They even resent it, and a lot of people actually hate what they do. But we have to work, right? It's the society within which we live. As much as I would, quite honestly, love to unplug from all of this, go and live off grid in the woods, I can't do that for a number of reasons. Maybe in the future I'll move towards that, and this video will sort of seem funny from years from now. But really, we've got to show up, and we've got to have a job, and we've got to do what we've got to do as a professional, right? But here's the thing, like, that cannot be at the expense of everything else. If it is, you're going to burn out. You're just going to throw yourself into the ground, right? So step 3, like, this is the thing to kind of get your head around, that I try and kind of teach people about in coaching, right? What is the minimum effective dose of the things? Minimum effective does, I've spelt that wrong, but anyway, what is the minimum effective dose of everything you need to do to keep in a good place? And I think I would go back to look at the pyramid before, and I would put this as like the bottom 2 levels of that pyramid, like the things you need to do and the relationships you need to have in your life to make sure you're showing up and fulfilling yourself and filling your cup, right? The minimum effective dose is really a concept that I think is really important right now, with the competing demands on us, and the how scarce or how valuable time is. Like, what is the minimum amount of work you need to put in day to day to make sure you're in a good place? So I think with working out, one of the things I've realized over the years, that a 60-minute workout for a lot of people is just simply not sustainable. So a 20-minute workout done 3 times a week is a hell of a lot better than a 60-minute workout that never gets done at all, right? So it's really drawing everything back to, like, what's the minimum effective dose of what you need to do every day to keep yourself in a good place, and then creating the non-negotiables around that. You need to hold yourself accountable to this if you don't have a coach, right? And that's the hardest thing to do, because in this day-to-day life, it's really easy to trade off what matters to us at the expense of doing things that what matters to, like, other people and the other roles we have to fulfill in life. But I need to tell you that you need to create non-negotiables for you. If you don't do this, then again, you're just gonna burn out. And lastly, this is the concept as well that I think is really important to understand, is that generally I found in life that a task takes the amount of time that you give it to do, right? So it kind of the task expands the time you give it to do. So what I would encourage you to do is be really rigid on that, which we'll talk about next, and to kind of give yourself some real structure here. Otherwise, we just end up getting busy doing nothing. Step 4 is to organize. So I'm a big fan of time blocking or scheduling my time out each week. And I know that's maybe the OCD, part of me, and maybe you hate the idea of that. But if you are in a place now where you're burnt out and you feel like you're constantly catching up, then again, you first need to audit it. You need to take ownership of what's important, and then you need to organize yourself, okay? And I'm not a big fan. I don't work on Sundays, but I will sit down on a Sunday and plan out my week. It just helps me go into the next week knowing, oh, Monday I'm doing this, Tuesday I'm doing that, etc., okay? And the thing you need to start with when you organize your time is the things that fill your cup. So things like self-care, movement, meditation, walking, seeing friends, spending time with your family, spending time with your children, spending time with your partner. They need to be like level 1 in that organization, because if you are expecting those things to happen as a priority, they're not going to happen unless you plan for them and you make them such, okay? You need to make them a priority. Big part of this organization piece is reflecting back, or looking forward and saying, right, is this thing going to help with one of my three priorities right now? Is it going to help for me? Is it going to help me in my connection? Is it going to help in my profession? And if it's not, then be okay with saying no. Create boundaries, right? This is about you taking ownership and control of your life and what matters most to you. And lastly, I think it's really important to understand, I think I've said this a few times, is that you need to ebb and flow as life changes. And the balance that works for you last week might simply not work for you the next month or so, based on everything you've got going on. And you need to kind of surrender to that and accept that life will do that to you. The best thing you can do is to let's say surrender to it, but also understand that there needs to be a kind of certain foundation of things that are key week in, week out for you as a person. So I hope that's been helpful in some way. Step one is to really understand your priorities. Really, really, really understand your priorities right now, what they are as a person. Step two is to audit. All right. Really look at what you're doing and take ownership of it. Step three is to understand what is the minimum effective dose of the things you need to do to keep yourself in a positive place, both mentally and physically and emotionally. And step four then is to organize, right? And this process is something that you should just keep going through, keep reviewing it, being okay with it. And if you can set up some structure around this, I think you will feel a lot better day to day in what you're doing. Right, lastly, again, Stoicism, which is something I'm really a massive fan of if you know me at all, is very, some of it's very doom or gloom. So there's like this a thing called the last day exercise, and but there's one that I really kind of think is something that's become important to me as I age and go through life. And it's not like I'm just worrying about death, but I do now really have a constant or real grasp of the fact that the time we have is finite. And ultimately, every decision I try and make now in terms of the use of my time goes back to, or goes forward to this end point of saying, you know, I'm laying on my deathbed, I look back and I go, was that the best use of my time in that moment? And that's really powerful, right? Because I don't believe that anyone will regret the time they spent with people around them they love and care about, doing things they truly love and enjoy in life. But I do believe that you may regret getting there and realizing that you sacrificed too much of your time doing things that don't fill your cup, and things such as work, which, you know, which is always going to be there, right? In this world, the way we work now, we can't, or none of us really work in an environment unless you work in like a factory or something like that still, where you just do like, you know, manufacturing. Like, there's always going to be more to do. It's always going to be more to do. That's simply the way it is. And if you don't appreciate that, and you are constantly trying to get everything done, and that means you sacrifice the things that really matter to you as a person, I believe that that's really going to fuck you up long term. And I don't want you to get to that end point and go, fuck, I wish I hadn't done that. I wish I'd have spent more time like being out in nature, or being with my children, or being with my partner, and not just being there, like being present with them as well, right? Not being distracted. So yeah, another thing for me as well, again, it's like sit on my soapbox as a guy who's working, you know, in his little room, working for himself. I coach a lot of people who work in what I would describe as extremely toxic cultures. And I know that there is certainly a trap you fall in, especially if, you know, you're a parent or a partner, you've got responsibilities and stuff like that. But I want you to push back against that toxic culture of expecting you to sacrifice you and your life for the sake of a job. I experienced in my old job in the police that when you are no longer convenient to them, or you don't fit with what they need, they will push you to the side. You are highly, highly disposable. If you break down tomorrow, you know, whatever, you know, the worst thing happens to you, you're going to be replaced within a week, right? And even if you work for yourself, again, own experience here of having gone through two very different careers in my life, like, you know, working for the man as a police officer and then working for myself. I need to tell you, if you are working for yourself and you've got this crazy thought, which is really common with business owners, which I thought is that you've just got to grind and keep pushing, that it's just not healthy. And I have missed out on so many important things in the last 5 to 6 years, especially as a result of not understanding that, you know, you need to put you and the things you love in life first. Okay. And that's really it. Put you first always in whatever you do in this world. Okay. And I know that's not easy. I know you've got responsibilities, and I know it's tough, but if you don't put yourself first, then no one else will. Okay. No one else will. Cool. I hope that's been helpful. I hope it isn't too soapboxy. If it is, I just hope you can appreciate that it comes from a place of love and from someone who wants to help you feel better day to day in what you do in this world, and to live a more fulfilled life and to experience more joy day to day. So yeah, that's it. Have a good one. If you've got any questions around this, you want to have a conversation around how you can start implementing some of the stuff in here, reach out, let me know. We can jump on a call. Take care. Bye.